This is Jay Ellenby. I'm president of Safe Harbors Business Travel. And yes, we are in unprecedented times. It continues to be a challenge every day with new regulations and rules taking place and really staying ahead of the curve of all the different topics taking place. We're now starting a new series, a video series we call Video Shorts, but we're actually calling it Travel Experts. And it's our responsibility to keep our clients informed and the community informed about what is taking place. I'm really excited today. John Rose, he's gonna kick off our series, and really excited about having him aboard with us. John is the Chief Risk Officer for ALTOUR, and I've known John for a number of years, and he knows how to speak to this stuff, and he really is a true expert at this. So welcome, John.
Thank you, Jay.
John, first of all, tell me, just so you can explain to everybody out there, can you explain what a risk manager does and how a risk manager interacts with a corporate client?
Sure. And the term risk manager can mean a lot of things depending on industry. So if you worked in an insurance company, you're looking at insurance risk and other things. But in purposes of a travel management company, a risk manager is helping the clients understand where their threat and risks intersect, and then what is their risk tolerance. So it's helping with their travel risk management policies and procedures, their duty of care programs, their travel tracking and alerting. It's helping them understand all of that, up to and including their insurance policies. What does your insurance cover you for? What doesn't it cover you for? Do you have coverage for medical assistance international? Should one of your travelers get sick now? All of those things are what a risk manager goes in and helps a company assess and then mitigate those risks.
So do you also get involved with travel policy recommendations as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So what do you say, you mentioned tracking a traveler. What do you say to a company when a company says, I have a traveler and they just refuse to be tracked? What is your response to them?
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces to that. It's absolutely understandable within privacy concerns. They don't want their device tracked. They don't want people to know exactly where they are. But a responsible company could come back, or institution, I shouldn't say company here all the time because there's many institutions that fall into this, universities, NGOs, whatever it might be, is saying we need to be able to geolocate within 25 kilometers where that person is, so we can properly alert them. And mobile apps can do that. Most people allow, whether it's Google or Facebook or whatever it is, they allow that to generally know where you are. That is enough for us in a risk management perspective to say, I know Jay is in Baltimore. I don't know what building you're in, but I know you're in Baltimore. So if something happens in Baltimore, I can properly alert you, but the institution that has sent you there can also say, I know Jay is in Baltimore and this has happened. Because if you just flew into Dallas, we don't know you're in Baltimore. All we know is that it said you were in Dallas. Well, you've driven, which is very realistic. I used to live there, as you know. I would drive from Dallas to Annapolis. Well, it doesn't say I'm in Annapolis. And if something happens in the Dallas area, I don't need to know that. If it's, a traffic jam or, an overturned truck had a chemical explosion. But if it happened in Annapolis, I dang sure want to know that it's going to impact me. And my institution wants to know that because they could say, hey, I need to reach out to John and help him mitigate this potential situation. So it's very important you know where your people are, and there are ways to do that, again, through mobile apps, through scraping devices that say, okay, where is their lodging? Because lodging is usually the central location to understand. It's not airport, it's lodging. Where is people staying? And a third of a business trip is in their lodging, at least a third. Sometimes I have some as high as 40%, because they sleep there, they eat there, they go there to do some work. You need to know where they're staying. And of course, the industry average is 50% of lodging is not part of the TMC booking. So that's an important piece, is to know where they're staying.
So it's kind of going back to that, because we've had situations where there are travelers who come back and say, you know what, I like my privacy. What do you do? What do you do with that traveler? Well,
it really comes down to the corporate culture of that organization, and are they willing to say, you will be tracked? We're going to give you a institution issued device, and we're going to track that because you're going to northern Nigeria, and we don't feel that's an acceptable area for you to go to because of potential for kidnapping, extortion, whatever it is. we're going to mandate this as part of our corporate policy. Other ones are going to say, okay, if you're actually going to opt out of this because of privacy concerns, you need to do X, Y, and Z, like log your itinerary every step of the way, maybe have a check-in so that they're not being tracked, but they're going in, opening an app, checking in and saying, here's my geolocation at this second, and then turning it back off again. Those type of policies I've seen implemented with very little pushback from the people who don't want to be tracked 24/7, but they'll say, yeah, I'll check in twice a day. I'm going to say I'm here in the morning, I'm here at night, and at least you know the city I'm in and where I was at that node so I can be alerted appropriately.
Yeah, good, thanks. So some of the things we're looking at, today, the current environment today is, with people traveling. There are travelers still traveling out there, much on project work and so on. They are traveling, and I also want to make sure we take a look at what's the new world going to look like. And you recently had an article where you did mention employee tracking, but you also talked about communications, information, and suppliers. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, sure. As you start to communicate with your employees, your travel policies are going to have to change. You have to amend a lot of things, and I can get into that later if you'd like. But it's communication, it's the duty to inform. So it's the responsibility of the institution to inform their travelers where they're going and what they may face for risk. This could be, you have to be at the airport 3 hours early. Now, I'm not saying that's the policy now, but that's foreseeable in some countries. What if they're doing a medical screening of every single person? You have to think about this like right after 9/11. Security was so extreme and they didn't have processes down that it was taking 3 hours to get through. So you have to think about this, is that you have to inform your travelers, this is what the procedure is going to be in this hotel. They're going to require you to wear masks. I mean, we've seen some airlines yesterday start to put it in place. We can assume most airlines are going to follow this suit. Yeah. Masks are going to be required everywhere. So issue them as a company and say, they don't have to be N95 medical professional masks, because I think we're trying to keep those for medical professionals, but masks are masks. Issue them so your travelers have them. So it's about informing a traveler of what they need to know. I mean, we've seen different state restrictions in the U.S. If you drive into driving into Utah, you have to log your itinerary. Part of their requirement. Obviously, foreign travel, you're going to see different restrictions by different countries, and part of our duty to inform is to tell people, okay, if you're going into, say, Jordan, this is the current policies and procedures in Jordan, so you can take appropriate action, as opposed to if they're out there not aware of this, they could get to a destination and be denied. Just yesterday, I saw someone denied going into a grocery store in LA because they didn't have a mask. It's really that, and the store's not giving out free masks, but they're saying you can't come in and get your milk. It's a realistic, it's the new world we live in. I'm not saying I like it. I have to address it from the world I live in perspective.
So John, in today's current environment, carriers are still flying at a very limited schedule. They're still flying. Some are still open. Car companies, they've reduced as well. But for the companies who are traveling today, what kind of information, what is it that can make those travelers feel more comfortable or safe? I mean, are the policies and procedures that some of the airlines are taking, such as center seats, having them open, are those kind of things? We're talking about having masks on the plane as well. Are those the kind of things that are going to make the traveler feel more confident of feeling safe?
Absolutely. That's what everyone's trying to do right now, is have traveler assurance. I like to use that word, assurance, not insurance, assurance. They need to feel safe when they're traveling. There's no data that says keeping a middle seat open makes you safer, but if it makes you feel safer, you're going to accept that. Wearing masks do make you safer. And I think the stat is, if a person has COVID, has a mask on, and they're sitting by someone who has a mask on, the chances of transmission are less than 1.5%. If the person with COVID doesn't have a mask on, there's a 70% transmission potential, and nobody has a mask on. So having everyone wear masks, it's more to have people who are sick from transmitting it than people who aren't from getting it. That's the bigger thing for the masks. So that should make you feel safer. You're seeing hotels and airlines and, black car services post a lot of videos about, this is our new cleaning procedures, and they're showing it. And that should make people feel better traveling. But that's from contracting anything, the cold, the flu, norovirus, whatever it is you don't want to get while traveling. you should feel more confident you're going to be able to travel safer than at any time in history from contracting a disease going forward. I really believe that, because of the extreme procedures being put in place should make you feel comfortable while traveling. But some people aren't going to feel comfortable, and that's also going to have to be addressed at the institution level.
So that's interesting. So we talked about those three categories, air, car, and hotel. Do you think companies should be looking at other areas as well, perhaps even their insurance policies? Should they be taking additional, not only just corporate, but also individuals taking insurance? And what areas should they look at if they should?
Well, I think the biggest one they should look at, and this comes up to me almost daily, is I've got a sick traveler. Who's going to take care of them? Okay. Who do they call? Who's going to answer the call? Well, the travel manager probably isn't trained on what to do. If John calls and says, I'm sick in my hotel in London, what do I do? Who is behind that? And there is insurance that does cover that. You know, the business travel accident policies that have a foreign accident and sickness component can cover that. And I'm not promoting any one company, but, you know, I know that world very well. You have to look at what do your coverages have and what don't they have, and where you might need to fill the gaps with assistance providers. You know, there's wonderful assistance providers out there that can do this for you. But if you have nothing, one is you've exposed your traveler, okay? But you've also exposed your company to potential reputational and financial liabilities, because trust me, people are going to litigate. We've seen countless litigation. I mean, every day there's a long list, of course, near where you live there in DC, of suits against whether it's institutions or other providers that they don't feel they were properly taken care of because of COVID. Now, whether that's individual travelers, restaurant owners filing for, you know, business interruption insurance, whatever, it's going to become a culture. You got to take care of people or you face a financial responsibility, and that's scary.
Yeah, you know, we're speaking a lot about risk management, which another word for that, suppose, is duty of care, or another phrase
Yes.
is duty of care. And there are many companies I know that we've worked with, and perhaps you have as well, is they all look at duty of care at different levels. You know, they look at it on one side, okay, just as you mentioned earlier, it's a dot on a map. You know, it's you know, I know where my travelers are and so on. But in today's environment, and we'll get to a second and what the future looks like, in today's environment, how much further should they go into having a more robust duty of care program?
Well, I think they have to for several reasons. Because we mentioned the financial liability, but here's the thing. Employees are expected to do the right thing for their company. If you're going out on business travel, you're going to conduct this business. But those same employees expect the institution that sent them there to have their back and protect them. So they're looking at the duty of care to make sure they're traveling safely. And in the go-forward environment, companies that don't, or institutions that don't have that in place, their business travelers may not travel. They might say, I'm not comfortable because I don't know who to call at 2 o'clock in the morning. If I get sick in London, am I going to be quarantined there for 6 months, which isn't real, but people are panicking about these kind of things. There's fear. Fear is an easy thing to mushroom in the world. And if companies don't have a duty of care policy in place, how are you going to confidently get your business travelers on the road, which may be a big part, and this is a term I like to use, to restart the engine. You got to get that business travel going because they're the ones out there making it rain and getting the influx of revenue. And if you can't get them going, that engine's going to start very, very slowly or completely stall. So you got to protect your people because they've got to feel confident with this.
So at a minimum for a duty of care program, certainly they should have some kind of tracking.
Yes.
They absolutely need to have some kind of tracking. In your recommendation in today's environment, what other steps should they take? Travel policy, documentation as well, language?
Yes, the travel policies are going to have to change. I mean, hotels are probably doing away with buffets. So the policies now have to address allowing room service. A lot of corporate travel policies don't allow that. Our policy is going to say no taxis. Almost to a person, I haven't heard a business traveler yet say they'll get in a taxi again because of the fear of this. Uber and others are taking some nice moves. Black car services, of course. So is that going to be not necessarily relaxed, but altered in the travel policies? Are they going to say, We no longer will support you doing sojourn trips pre and post for leisure because we don't want you taking your own time to potentially be exposed because we can't control it. I'm not saying they have to do that. Those are things that are being talked about in a very aggressive manner within companies right now. You know, there are going to be other policies about which airlines they fly. And a big one is who's going out there and helping procure the hotel contracts and actually assess those properties to the fact, are they actually walking the talk? Because everyone's going to say, we clean everything. We know that's not going to be 100% accurate. So who's going to help assess that so the corporate travel policy can say, we only use these 3 chains, and we use these 3 chains because we actually are comfortable with their policies post-COVID, and that's a big one.
You said something there that's the breakfast buffets will be gone. Wow, that's a new reality.
Well, but it's very real.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it mandated, but I've seen it mentioned multiple times, and hotels are saying, yeah, that's kind of a scary environment for spreading because no one's going to have masks on. They got to eat.
Yeah.
They're touching everything. Yeah. There's the potential for spread. I just don't see how that you can feel safe in that environment right now.
So companies that, you know, of course, there are companies who are still traveling at a limited level. Other companies have more or less, they put a moratorium. They have shut down their travel and they're waiting for areas to open up. What are those? What are those areas? What are those yellow lights or green lights perhaps that companies are going to need to say, okay, we're now traveling? What are those things?
Well, I think the biggest one will be there. If they were talking in the United States, it's the state restrictions. If the state has relaxed the stay at home, then why aren't they traveling? I mean, they said you got to go back to work. You're seeing a lot of states. I think it's 20 right now, and it's counting. It's going to go eventually be back to all 50 here in coming weeks and days. Well, if your stay at home is relaxed and you've given the policies, wear masks, whatever procedures, there's no reason they can't start business travel again. Now, international comes with some different, because there are some warnings from the government. There's a lot of restrictions depending on the country you're going into and leaving. That's going to evolve in the coming days and weeks to understand what's going to be acceptable. But within the United States, as the state relaxes the policies, why can't you start traveling again? Because we know the travel industry is going to be at the forefront of making sure people can feel confident traveling, because we're the ones that are hurt the most. We have the most to lose if we don't get this right going forward. So the airlines are going to, the airports, the ground transportation, we're going to do it. They're going to do it right.
So as the states start to reopen, you think that'll be in parallel to when CDC or WHO come out and say, will they be in unison when all the states open up, or you think they're going to be a little off kilter of when they make recommendations of reopening?
I think they'll be similar, but not the same. And the reason comes into there's political agendas at all sides, left, right, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You have to kind of look beyond the political agendas. What's the factual data, and is it safe to travel? So I think you will have wildly varying opinions from perceived experts about whether it's safe to open or not. That's why, as you know, Jay, I don't read the news. I don't watch the news. I try to get my sources from either intelligence sources, or there are some open, you know, IHME is a great source of actual factual, because they're using artificial intelligence to analyze the spread and decline of the disease, not just state by state, but most countries are in that. And it's very important to have that information at your hands that you can trust, as opposed to something that's politically motivated. I mean, I don't know how you can make a good business decision there, regardless of what side of the fence you sit on. I mean, what's the underlying agenda? I need to make the best decision for my institution, and who can help me do that is a big one. And of course, you have to trust your TMC in that case. Yep.
So clearly, for a company who has shut down their travel, now's a perfect opportunity to not only really take a deep look at their duty of care program, their risk management, travel policy, everything associated with that. So it's a tremendous opportunity to do a real deep review on that. Moving forward, post-COVID, you talked about travel policies. You talked about with respect to hotels and air, is there anything else, any other features within a travel policy that a company really or organization should look at that make sure they cover those features within a travel policy?
Well, I think a big part of it, and this ties back to organizations like yours, Jay, how much do I rely on my TMC for this information? You know, just making an online booking does not necessarily mean that I've got someone behind me to support that booking should something come into question. It may not go wrong, but somebody gets to a hotel and says, oh, the policies here are quite unique. Who do I have as a resource behind me to talk to me about that? If the travel restrictions are changing by the hour, who has that information behind me? So I think a big part of it going forward is who's helping you, who's answering the call 24/7 from my institution, and that's not the TMC. I'm talking 24/7 security, medical, you know, emergency assistance. Who is behind that? And do I have a mechanism to know where 100% of my people are? Because if you don't, you violated your duty of care responsibility. And that's, I think, going forward. Duty of care / travel risk management usually was somewhere between 3rd and 7th on a company's checklist of important items in their travel. You know, of course, obviously it's going to be service, the procurement, the cost and everything. Now it's went to number 1. The head of the table is now risk. How am I addressing risk so our travelers can travel with confidence, and then those other things can fall into place so that we don't blow our budget out of water? Because I don't want to say somebody with $1 million travel budget goes and spends $1 million in duty of care. That's not realistic. It's about understanding what you need, not what you might be able to procure, but it's also understanding where you don't. I mean, a lot of companies realized just how exposed they were when everyone had to come back from all over the world. They were running around. They didn't have a clue. And they were asking, oh, this hotel, we've heard rumors, they're following social media. You have someone to sift through all of that, and the TMC is your aggregator of all of this behind you so that they can procure this from the vendors for you.
So with that, you know, looking forward, we have travel policies and we have other categories: technology, communication, and education. Technology-wise, what kind of technology features should that TMC or should that corporation or organization have to really look forward?
Well, I think there's 2 big ones. Is they have to have the ability to know where the traveler is so that if an alert comes out that's meaningful to that traveler, that traveler gets it through a mobile app, email, whatever mode, but they get that information because it's meaningful to them so they can then take an action on it. So if Jay's within 25 kilometers of this incident, you know. But also, just as important, if you're not within 25 kilometers of it, you don't know because you don't want to know something going on in Cairo. That just becomes white noise. The second part, which is really impactful, is that the travel managers that you work with get that same proximity report knowing who their travelers are that are impacted by that. So they can take their own action, whether that's passing it to a vendor that they use for their duty of care 24/7 monitoring, their own corporate security department, whatever their policy is, that they can take action on that. And of course, the TMC behind it is the aggregator of that information to help them put this all together because it comes from disparate sources, who's going to consult with them to make sure their duty of care program is what they need it to be. I'm not saying you have to be world class. You don't have to spend what, you know, a company with 1 million business trips has one policy versus a company with 100. You have to understand what's right for you. And there is no cookie cutter solution. You have to assess it, implement it, and then support it.
All right, that's great. So I think we could even take a deeper dive, but I want to be respectful of your time. You know, we could even get into repatriation. We can get involved. We could probably talk about extraction. And when it comes to, I know you do. But you know, there's certainly topics that all fall within the family of duty of care risk management that does deserve attention at another time. But you know, communication and education, I think that's a key thing that travelers need to understand, that the company has a fiducial responsibility to that traveler, and the traveler needs to feel comfortable that those programs are in place. What's the best way for a TMC and a corporation association to work together with that traveler to feel comfortable that they have a solid plan?
A big part of it is to have a product that you can bring to those companies that does the 3 phases of travel, which is you have to help them get ready before they go. They need to know information about where they're going. Like we said, travel restrictions, country reports. You need to track them while they're there, and then you need to have somebody who can do that responding while they're in need. And the TMC needs to be at the table with the provider. And there's a lot of great providers, you know, Stabilitas, International, SOS, World Aware, Drum Cusack. There's a long list of these great providers you can bring to the table and say, hey, here's how we're getting the information in the hands of the traveler most effectively so something doesn't go wrong. Because like, and Jay, you've heard me say this for probably 15 years, I love travelers just a little bit paranoid, because if they have enough information to be slightly paranoid, they'll still travel and they almost never have anything go wrong because they're observing everything around them. That's from preparation, getting them ready before they go. And I think that's a big part of it. The TMCs are going to be vital to the preparation around country restrictions, travel restrictions, airport, airplane, rental car, hotel restrictions. There's all these new things going to happen, and we can't expect the companies to be sifting through these mountains of data points to find that information. They have to go to one trusted source who can be their partner in helping them get this information in the hands of the traveler and the company. Companies need to make policies. When are we going to let people travel? When are we going to say don't travel? I mean, when are we going to say it's okay to do this, this, and this, but it's not this? Meetings and events come up constantly. When is it going to be safe to start doing meetings and events? You know, is that rapid? Is that going to be something we phase in? And again, it's understanding the risk tolerance and how to mitigate against risks. You know, like we've seen companies like Facebook publicly say, no meetings of more than 50 people per meeting room for another year. That isn't stopping their meetings program. That's stopping the size of the meeting rooms because they don't want aggregated risk of more than 50 people in any one room. But that's important to pass that on.
You know, John, you and I think we've seen a lot over the years. We've seen it all, everything from certainly from terrorism to recession to epidemics in the past, but certainly we've never seen anything like this ever, and at least in our lifetime. But that's certainly not going to say that we're not going to see it again. We're going to see some kind of form of disruption. Can we ever be as prepared for that?
Well, every time something happens, you can put your head in the sand, or you can take a proactive policy and attack it and put a policy, a procedure, and protocol in place to address it. We did it after, like all the events, but 9/11 was the best example. And we actually made travel better. And travel's never been safer in the history of the world. You know, when you look at airline incidents, yes, we've had some horrific crashes, but it's never been safer. So we can put things in place. Can we stop another pandemic? No, but we can have better procedures and protocols in place that maybe we mitigate the spread of that pandemic much faster. Shutting down countries, that's going to be argued politically probably for years, whether that was a good or bad move. We'll wait to see the data points come out. What we know is it was foreseeable to start with. We've had pandemics before. They just never caused the world to shut down. It caused very small regions of the world. SARS, MERS, even H1N1 created some real issues. That was the last declared global pandemic, and most of us don't even remember that. You had the Hong Kong flu of the 60s. You know, there's been other issues. We can put these things in place, and as long as we have a model to follow, we can mitigate our risk as best we can. We can't mitigate 100%. That's not realistic in the world, but you can mitigate as much as we can, and that's having a strong partner behind you to put all of this together.
Fantastic. John Rose, Chief Risk Manager Officer at ALTOUR, thank you so much for joining us. For everybody out there, been fantastic. Next week, we're going to have Tamara Makovic. She's our Vice President of Account Management, and we're going to be talking specifically about travel policy and how we can make sure that in the current environment and moving forward, how we make sure to talk about the things that John just mentioned. So, John, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate your
Thanks, Jay.
being with us.